The strangers began enslaving the villagers, targeting their energetic youth. These young men and women were forcibly taken to the strangers' distant world, never to return. Most of the strangers were males who had left their wives in their great world and forcibly given birth with the innocent women in the village. They gave birth to children whose true skin colors couldn't even be determined. Among the youth stolen from the village was Esi. Esi was admired by many in the village and was about to marry one of the most honorable men in the community. Her promising future was cut short when she was captured during a farming trip with her parents. The strangers manipulated the villagers' love for their goods, bribing corrupt individuals from the village and neighboring communities to capture more slaves in exchange for their goods. In their foreign land, the enslaved villagers were treated as mere tools for labor, working endlessly on farmlands to fuel the strangers' industrial ambitions. The strangers too competed wildly to resist attacks from their neighboring communities who heard of their source of raw materials from the village in the other world, their slaves, and their center of surplus goods investment. They resisted the attacks both in the villages located in the other world and in their homelands. The journey to this world was so far that escape was nearly impossible. Back in the village, the once shining community was left in ruins. The absence of the youth drained the village of its vitality. The laughter of happy children and the wisdom of elders vanished, leaving behind a barren land and broken spirits. Even the new knowledge the villagers discovered from the strangers couldn't do them any good. Some of the villagers were made to believe that their initial development was archaic and described them as ignorant. In the strangers' world, the enslaved villagers endured unimaginable cruelty. They were treated so harshly that even slaves in their village had never endured. The slaves were treated as animals and their voices silenced. They were made to serve the blue-skinned people. To further humiliate them, the strangers wrote books portraying the villagers as ignorant and impoverished, erasing their rich culture and history. These lies spread, leading the rest of the world to look down on the villagers, forgetting that they had once lived in harmony and self-sufficiency. Meanwhile, those left in the village faced harsh labor under the strangers' rule. Despite their hard work, which contributed to the village's rapid growth, resentment and anger grew. The villagers longed for independence and freedom. The strangers introduced their own education system to the village, and while some of the villagers excelled, others used the knowledge to strategize ways to fight back. Resistance began to take place. Some of the youth formed groups to resist the strangers' rule. While some were too timid to act, others displayed incredible courage, committing themselves to the struggle. They repeatedly faced the strangers who used brutal force and firearms to maintain control. The loss of countless lives of those who were killed in the village and those who died in the sea during the journey to the strangers' world not only instilled fear but also strengthened the villagers' desire for freedom. In the strangers' world, the enslaved villagers also sought to escape and return home to rebuild their villages. However, every escape attempt ended in failure, and those who led the efforts were killed mercilessly. Though the villagers were beaten down, their spirit of resistance burned brightly. Both in their homeland and in the strangers' world, they dreamed of freedom, unity, and restoration of their dignity, and secretly planned towards achieving them. The strangers, together with their neighboring nations, divided the enslaved villages among themselves, asserting their dominance over the lands and people. Under their oppressive rule, the villagers endured unspeakable suffering and hardship. With their determination and undying hope for freedom, the villagers began to unite, organizing themselves to resist the attacks. The fight for liberation was a long and brutal struggle marked by bloodshed and loss of countless lives. Despite the overwhelming odds, the villagers eventually triumphed, casting off the strangers' rule and reclaiming their independence. Their victory inspired neighboring villages. Some rose up in their own battles for freedom, driving the strangers from their lands, while others chose to coexist, allowing the strangers to remain under new terms. A wave of resistance was made to reshape the region, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and enduring quest for self-determination. Some of the strangers, gripped by fear and uncertainty, abandoned the villages of the ash-skinned people and returned to their homelands in another world. With their departure, the control of the villages fell back into the hands of the villagers. Eager to rebuild, they chose their own leaders and adopted many systems left behind by their former captors. They embraced the languages, lifestyles, government styles, and educational structures of their oppressors, believing these to be tools for progress. Yet, despite the freedom, the villagers found themselves unable to reclaim their identity. They could not return to the simplicity of their old days, nor could they fully master under the adopted ways of their captors. This in-between existence left them uncertain. Over the years, advancement in technology surged, improving transportation, communication, and various aspects of life, progressing so rapidly that they paved way for modern-day technological era in the Blue People's world. The technology made remarkable innovations even in the villages. As time passed, a hunger for power grew among the people. Leaders entrusted with the hopes of rebuilding the villages saw freedom not as an opportunity to serve, but as a means to enrich themselves and their families. Ordinary villagers, burdened by hardship, became complacent, blaming their former captors and their corrupt leaders for every misfortune. Though the captors had physically departed, they maintained a grip on the villagers' minds and futures, exerting influence through debt and dependency. The strangers, now armed with advanced technology that made control easier, kept a close eye on the villagers, manipulating their political and social structures with subtle mental tactics, and whenever resistance arose, they used brutal force, threatening destruction with their superior weapons, hunting down and eliminating any courageous leaders who dared to challenge their influence, leaving the villagers in fear and constantly robbed of their visionary personalities who could have led to true freedom. The drive to unite the villages to form one strongest kingdom flickered in the hearts of a few visionary leaders, but these efforts were constantly sabotaged. From afar, they sowed seeds of division, stirring conflict, using drugs as a weapon to destroy the people and inciting political overthrows that plunged the villages further into chaos. The villagers, overwhelmed by the corruption and mismanagement, began to turn back to their former captors for better lives. They took those decisions despite knowing the challenges they would face there. Freedom had come, but its promise remained unfulfilled. The villagers, still suffering, longed for peace, progress, and a sense of purpose. Their story became one of the bittersweet stories, unveiling untapped potential and reminder of what could be achieved of unity, honesty, and commitment